There we go. All right. You guys aren't taking it easy on me. You want to go after the big kahuna, the problem of evil. It's 2:05. I think we can do a Kahoot and review that last one. That could be fun. I think let's kind of just go right into it. You okay? You okay with that? I mean, we can take a 10-minute game. It's fun, but let's go into the big one. All right. So, how can you believe in God? Most people believe what their parents taught them. That's a nothing burger. Big Bang supports belief in God, not chance. By the way, evolution is the change of life, not the beginning of life. So like COVID virus evolved. It changed over time. The fact that I look different than someone else in this room, right? If we all have, and we do have all a common ancestor. Well, science proves that mitochondrial Eve, we all have a single female ancestor. And Y chromosome Adam, we have a single male ancestor. We can notice that from the DNA in the mitochondria and the DNA on the Y chromosome, because women are XX, men are XY. And so with that, though, I'm careful with the term evolution. It's very loaded. The word evolution actually means change over time. That does zero for where life came from. You with me? And then, of course, there's the topic of micro versus macro evolution, okay? The point is, evolution does not explain life. Evolution is an explanation for diversity of life, not how life starts. And life from non-life is one of the main reasons that atheists become Christians, because you can't get life from chemicals. Jesus is the best documented person in ancient history. He's not a legend, not even close. Again, we didn't even go into the eyewitness evidence in the four Gospels, other topic. Another topic is the archaeology that confirms the New Testament, especially Luke and Acts have a lot of archaeological details that we've confirmed. So we didn't have time to go into that. Number 5, if God does not exist. Okay. Number 6, the Bible promotes injustice and oppression. Okay? Well, let's just contrast that. If no God exists, you're not a person. So what's wrong with oppressing you? There's no real choice. So why should I get punished for oppressing you? There's no real value. Like the Queen song, nothing really matters. Anyone can see. Nothing really matters to me, right? There's no such thing as truth, right? So there's 2 options with your brain. Your brain is amazing. Option number 1, your brain evolved by accident to help you make lots of babies, pass on your DNA. Your brain did not evolve to discern truth. Your brain evolved to make lots of babies, pass on your DNA. Option 2, the creator of the universe, the source of truth. Jesus claims to be, I am the way, the truth, and the life. The very definition of truth created your brain, not just to help you survive. Yes, there is Song of Solomon there, by the way. If you're married, you go home and read that with your wife or your husband after you're done here. Give you a break from all the thinking. There's not just Song of Solomon, it's also Proverbs, right? The creator of the universe, the source of truth, created your brain to discover him, to love him back. He already loves you. He wants you to love him back and to discern what is true or not true. Either your brain is an accident or is created by the definition of truth, capable of discerning what is truth. So if God doesn't exist, your brain isn't reliable enough to determine whether God exists or not. If there is no God, your brain is an accident. And it's evolved to make more babies, not to discern what is true. So then how can you use your brain to say, I'm too smart to believe in God? Do you follow me? If your brain is an accident, it's not reliable. All right, so if there is no God, there is no actual truth. Okay, we could all be illusion in a big video game. There is no ultimate purpose, is no real right and wrong. Which society is going to have more justice? One where everyone believes there is no God and therefore no accountability, or a society that believes every human is in God's image? Right? Which society will have more evil in it, more oppression in it, more racism, more sexism in it? Option A or option G, right? A for atheism, G for God. If every person's in God's image, if God gives you the choice and you're responsible for that choice, if every person has value as God's child, if God is truth and you can get to know him as truth, if God is love, the very source of love can help you love your enemies, right? And instead of you making it up or your government making it up or the UN making up what's right or wrong, God says what's right or wrong. He says it is wrong to murder, it is wrong to rape, it is wrong to judge people based on the color of their skin or what nation they're from or anything else. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. Honest atheists admit life has no meaning. Really famous atheist, Jean-Paul Sartre, Frenchman. Okay, life has no meaning the moment you lose the illusion of being eternal. Well, if that is true, the opposite's also true. The moment you realize there is an eternal, now life does have meaning. Okay? And again, cannot overstate the importance of Imago Dei, image of God. Humans are in the image of God. This is why racism and sexism and slavery and genocide and all these other things are wrong, because every person is created in the image of God. But God, if you are the God of love, how can you allow so much injustice? Right? So today's talk, this afternoon's talk, will be injustice for all. So an argument is that bad things happen, so a good God cannot exist. You know, so many tragic stories we can share. We'll get into them all. This idea has its origin not with atheism, but with polytheism. Epicurus, 341 to 270 before Christ, BC, believed that gods existed, that there were immortal, blissful beings, not an atheist, but he believed that they didn't care about humans. They were indifferent. Okay? So to him, the presence of evil does not indicate gods don't exist. The presence of evil indicates gods are indifferent to humans, and humans should therefore be indifferent to them and ignore the gods. Don't go to the temple. Don't make sacrifices. They don't care about you. You don't need to care about them. And his logic was the gods either wish to take away evil but are unable to, they're able but unwilling, or they're neither willing nor able, or they're both willing and able. Those are your four logical options. But since evil exists, the last one can't be true. So over time, this idea has evolved, like Santa Claus, okay? If God were all-powerful and all good, he will do away with evil. Since evil exists, then either God is not all-powerful, why call him God, or he's not all-good, why worship him? Now, where did this come from? 1779, David Hume, right? Coming from a Christian culture in I believe it was Scotland. Let me just double-check my notes, right? He published, after he died, he published Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion, a Scottish philosopher, okay? So a big fan of science, and he kind of reformulated the Epicurus's, the Greek guy's, ideas. If God is all-powerful, he should be able to prevent evil if he has all the power. If God is all good, he should want to prevent evil. Yet evil and suffering clearly exist. So therefore, an all-good, all-powerful God does not exist. Always look for the assumption. Where is the assumption? Again, growing up in a Christian culture with a lot of Christian assumptions, where's the assumption in those phrases? Where's the assumption?
How about one is he's not preventing evil, which we are really in the process.
Sorry?
One assumption is that God is not preventing evil, but he's in the process of preventing evil.
It's amazing things aren't worse. Right now, we could have a death match and one person walks out of this room. I don't want to, okay? I might not be the one that walks out, right? And there's the strongest, because two smaller people can take out a big person. The fact that there is less murder than there could be. We could all be murdering everybody all the time. Things could be way worse. So yes, I believe God is preventing evil all the time, right? The other thing is just, what is evil? Again, he likes philosophy and he likes science. Evil is not a scientific term. Suffering could say that is, but evil clearly exists. It clearly exists with a Christian background. Yes, evil clearly exists. If there is no God, there is no evil. Evil is a theological word. That's not biology, okay? If there is no God, there is no evil, okay? So is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then here's the criticism. Then he is impotent, not all powerful. Is he able but not willing? He's malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Why call him God? Now again, this is a big thing. Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of quotes this paradox, right? And again, here's the assumption: evil. If there is no God, there is no evil. But we have a strong emotional reaction to evil. We have a strong, don't we? Like who here is okay with a kid dying a slow, painful death from cancer? Doesn't that just kind of get you? Or you see a video of the Holocaust or something, you'll see these injustices happen. You're just like, oh, right? And it's not the same as the lion and the zebra. We can say, well, in heaven, the lion and the zebra are going to be buddies. Okay, that's fine. Seeing human suffering versus zebra suffering is not the same, especially of children, right? Well, first of all, we need some humility. Proceed with extreme caution when commandeering other people's pain to build your case against God. So my friend took a course at a university in Wisconsin on the Holocaust. And there's this professor, this brilliant man with a PhD, and he's going over all these details of how the Holocaust happened and, a part of World War II, all this stuff. At the end of class, with all these young adults in his class, he's in this position of authority as a professor. And he authoritatively states, in light of the Holocaust, you can't believe in a loving God. Who am I to argue with him? He's an expert. Well, if you say you like science, let's do some science. Let's have a hypothesis. Is it possible to know about the Holocaust, still believe in God? Pastor Dave, do you know about the Holocaust? Yes. Do you still believe in a loving God? That's straight up a lie. You can know in the Holocaust and believe in a loving God. Okay? Recently I was listening to a podcast by atheists, and they're like, all you have to do to stop believing in God is walk through a children's hospital. So in other words, you can't believe in God and walk through a children's hospital. I was like, I've been in a children's hospital many times, actually, with my suffering child. I've visited church members in a children's hospital, and point blank, there's people going in there who, it's so tragic, they let go of God. That happens. The other people go in there, it's so tragic, they have to hold on to God. How arrogant to say that you can't believe in God. You can say you shouldn't believe in God. Okay, I'll give you that. In light of the Holocaust, you should not believe in God. But how arrogant, untrue, unscientific to say you can't. Are you following? Not only are there people who know about the Holocaust, whether it's in Germany, right? Also Eastern Europe, right? In World War II, or here's a picture on the right. That's not from Germany. That's from Rwanda, from the Rwandan genocide. Well, there are people who not only still believed in God, knowing it, there are people who experienced it. And instead of saying you can't believe in a loving God, they would say you must believe in a loving God. I forgot to put the picture on here, but I texted it to my wife to save it. On my phone right here, bam, I was sharing this message in Ontario, near Toronto, and this lady right here went up to me after I shared, because I mentioned Rwanda. She was in the Rwandan genocide. She has a scar across her forehead and on her wrist. She got macheted. They tried to kill her. They killed her family. Many years later, one of the men who came to her family farm and murdered her brothers, her sister, her parents, he came there, right? And I think it was her grandmother was home. He came there, he knocked on the door. She opened the door and he fell to his feet and confessed that he was the murderer. And he begged her for forgiveness. She brought him into her home. She fed the man. Later on, they helped him travel to Ontario. And you know what they called him? The man who murdered their uncles. In their tradition, someone they really care about. It doesn't have to be biological, but a really close friend, you call them uncle. You know what they called him? They called him uncle. If there is no God, you have no mechanism for that kind of forgiveness. This is a miracle. And she has the scars to prove it. He is a part of the family he murdered, of the survivors. He's a part of the family of the survivors of the very family that murdered. And they, instead of saying, right, again, a nice, comfortable, middle-class professor or, wherever you are, he doesn't have to be a professor, but, we're comfortable, we're safe in the West, and we point the finger, you can't believe in God. 'Cause look at these evil things that happened. When the people who were in the evil, many of them said, you must believe in a loving God to survive. Be very careful taking other people's pain to write God off the list. Because often, this is the truth, and we know this, often extraordinary suffering leads to extraordinary confidence in God. Right? Let's take the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere, Haiti. Let's compare it with the richest parts of North America. Where are there more people who believe in God? Haiti or Canada, the U.S.? I'm sorry, but Vancouver's one of the most beautiful parts of the world. We're atheist central. We make Seattle look like the Bible Belt. We are super, super secular in Vancouver. And just so beautiful, millionaire homes everywhere. Everywhere. And we don't believe in God because of suffering. Know where there's suffering? Haiti has way more suffering. Haiti has way more faith. So how can we say you can't believe in God because of suffering when the people who suffer the most often have the most faith? Corrie ten Boom says, I needed my belief in a good God to get me through the Holocaust. Her family was murdered. She was put in prison for protecting Jews and hiding them. She wrote the book called The Hiding Place, hiding them in her home. Extraordinary suffering often leads to extraordinary confidence in God. Right? And this is why, whether you believe in God or not, if you believe in science and you are an atheist, if you run a hospital or a police force or you're a military leader, you want to hire religious leaders as chaplains to work in your hospital, your army, and your police force, your fireman force. You want chaplains there. Why? Because humans need faith to help them go through suffering. They do better. People who are prayed for in a hospital, not everyone survives. We know that. We've prayed for people and watched them die. It's very sad. But people who are prayed for, number one, have a better chance of not dying. So faith is medicine. People who are prayed for in a hospital have a greater chance of not dying. And in the meantime, they're more polite to the nurses. So if you run a hospital and you don't believe in God, but you believe in money and science, you want to not just hire nurses and doctors and physician's assistants, you want to hire religious chaplains to work in your hospital, you'll get better medical outcomes. You'll have less people die, and you'll have better behavior in the meantime. Okay? The truth is, there's no rational argument against the existence of God or the involvement of the God of Jesus, the God we see here, based on injustice in the world. Why? Jesus is the central character, the central story in Christianity, Jesus Christ. Did Jesus suffer injustice? Yeah. tortured to death. Innocent man, tortured to death. Arguably the best person or one of the best people to ever live, right? Jewish carpenter, brutally tortured to death on a Roman cross at the behest of the Jewish religious leaders. And what did he say? On the cross, he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? How can we argue that the God of Jesus didn't exist because suffering exists when Jesus himself suffered so bad, right? And the thing is, Christians have never made an argument that God's existence is based on a world where bad things never happen to good people. Nobody ever said, since bad things never happen to good people, therefore a good God exists. Okay? In fact, injustice in the world doesn't call into question the existence of God. Injustice in the world calls into question the justice of God. But why do we assume that if God exists, he has to be just? So the problem is always in the assumptions. You got to read between the lines. Where's the assumption? Why do we assume that if God exists, he has to be a just God? We do not get this from Babylon, right? People talk about the flood story, the Gilgamesh flood story. I've read the Gilgamesh flood story, right? It is a flood story. The character of the gods is totally different than the flood story in the Bible. The gods don't care about you. In fact, they're annoyed, the big gods, the more powerful gods, they're annoyed that humans are making noise, so they have a plan to kill all the humans with the flood and not tell them about it. They're like, they're annoying, flick. As if you know it'd be water, right? So a weaker God doesn't feel this is just, so the weaker God goes over and talks to the Noah-type guy, warns him. Noah's like, I should get ready. So Noah builds an ark, right? It is actually not Noah. It is, I think it's Gilgamesh, right? So this guy makes the ark, survives with some animals. Then the bigger God finds out and gets so mad, he goes to punish the smaller God that saved humanity by warning the Noah character. Not a nice God. In Genesis, God creates a perfect world. We mess it up. God is sorry he made us. We're so bad. He only finds one righteous person, gives them 120 years to repent. They don't. Then he floods the world. Contrary to Jonah, right? Going to destroy them. They're so bad. Warns them. They repent. Boom, they're saved. And that is the bad guys, right? Nineveh are the bad guys that destroy Israel later on. And God saves them because they repented, right? So the character of God is totally different than the gods of Babylon. Even the stories that people say we got the story from, right? They say, you didn't get the flood story from Noah. You got it from Gilgamesh. Yeah, but they're totally different in the character of God. Is God love? No. Not in Babylon, he's not. Here he is, right? We don't get it from Greek culture. You ever watch the Battle of Troy? Right? By the way, Brad Pitt, amazing actor. He's basically like an atheist version of the story. Totally inaccurate. I've read the original Iliad and Odyssey, and in there, Achilles is very spiritual. He sacrifices faithfully to the gods, but the gods don't care. So when he's battling Hector, Hector's the better guy, Achilles the better warrior, but the gods are mixing everything up. So they give Hector some spears, so he's doing okay. So Hector's throwing the spears, then this one goddess is helping Hector. He's like, man, I don't feel like helping him anymore. So she just flips over to Achilles, and every time Achilles throws a spear, this goddess runs over, grabs the spear, and gives it back to him. So he's like, he has a machine gun. He has unlimited spears. Hector can't compete. He's fighting Achilles and the goddess, and Hector dies. There's no justice there. It's just whatever the gods were in the mood for, right? The Greek gods weren't just. They were flippant, right? They were careless. They were brutal. Why do we assume if there is a God, he must be good and just? Someone told us that. You know who told us that? Jesus did. The justice and dignity for all version of God only has a source in Jesus Christ of Nazareth. That is the primary source of God. You can also, Moses, the Old Testament, etc., but it is clearest there, and it's not coming from other cultures, right? This idea that if God exists, he has to be good and beautiful and perfect, that comes from the Bible. It doesn't come from other cultures. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is, right? So if anyone had a reason to stop believing in God because of injustice, it's not that professor in Wisconsin, it's not you or me. If anyone had the best reason to stop believing in a God of a God of justice because of injustice, it was Jesus. Right? Bad things happen, so a good God cannot exist. It's not an ancient mythology. It's not in the Bible. There's a modern Western assumption, and it's a minority assumption. And the people who say this trumpet it like everyone should believe in it, right? It's like saying you have to choose God or science. No, you don't. There's tons of scientists who believe in God, right? It's just factually wrong, scientifically untrue. This idea is an assumption in Western society where we have the least amount of suffering, and in this case, the least amount of humility. Stephen Hawking said this: "The terror that stalks my mind at night is that we have arrived on the scene because of evolution, because of naturalistic selection. And natural selection assumes natural rejection, which means we have arrived here because of our aggression. We've arrived here because our ancestors killed off the others, and we made it." Right? Is this a good way to have a society? No. No, this is brutal. Again, if God doesn't exist, if you really look at it, that should be a scary thought. You should want God to exist. Right? Our idea of justice came from Jesus and the Bible. This idea did not come from describing how things are. Here's the silver bullet. It comes from describing how things should be. Everybody can agree we got problems, right? You see war, you see famine, you see disease, you see injustice and oppression. Everyone can say this is not how things should be. Okay? What's the best description of how things should be? Is it Karl Marx and his communist utopia? We've tried that a lot. Every single time we try and make heaven on earth, following the teachings of Marx, it leads to mass murder. Because I can justify anything to make heaven on earth, and you're in the way. Right? Dictator's best dream. Right? If you want to get rid of injustice, really, the best way to get rid of injustice is to get rid of God. Because there is no God, there is no standard for justice. Then injustice ceases to exist, right? You only know a crooked line because you have a straight line. If you get rid of the straight line, the crooked line is just a line now, right? Crooked is comparison to straight. So injustice is the opposite of justice. You get rid of God, you get rid of the definition of justice. Then what you're left with is you have my justice, my version, your justice, Nazi justice, icy justice, majority justice, right? Democracy is brutal. Ancient Greek, right, where democracy comes from, they had democracy without human rights. So one time the Greeks would conquer a city, they're like, well, we got them, what should we do now? Or it's like, hey, I say let's kill all the men, rape all the women, and take all the children as slaves. All in favor? They vote yes. That's democracy. Kill all the men, rape all the women, take all the children as slaves. That's not the justice I want. That's majority justice, clan justice, nature's justice. Nature's brutal. Now, I watch these cartoons with my kids, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and they have, the Tacodile Supremes, like a crocodile, and so gentle and loving to its children. And we just didn't mess with nature. Nature's so beautiful and perfect and loving. No, nature will kill you and not even feel it. You get lost in the forest, you get lost in the mountains here, nature doesn't care about you. When I tried driving up to Pikes Peak yesterday, nature didn't care about my schedule. I should have drove up there before I got my hair cut, right? Tried driving up there, and I was just at 11,000 feet at Cove, and I was like, the last 3,000 feet, come on! And the big snowplow truck comes down and was like, yeah, turn around. So I went down a little bit further. I was going to work on my sermons there, because as a pastor, you might as well. If I can work on my sermons in a building, might as well work on them up in a mountain. Went down there, and the snowplow followed me. Yep, get down, get off the mountain, don't care how you feel, Nature doesn't care about you. Nature's brutal. That's why we have things called buildings and air conditioner and furnaces. And I like my furnace. Every time I'm out camping with my RV, I used to be a real camper in a tent. And now that I have a furnace, I'm like, do I need to go in a tent? You know? I love nature. I just like being warm and cozy. There's street justice, right? There's rich justice, right? He who holds the gold rules. There's power justice. Now, we always have some of that. But with our constitutions, right, constitutions and human rights, it helps to balance power and spread power to the little guy and the little girl as well. Otherwise, the rich and powerful take everything, and they take their wealth and power to get more wealth and power, till they have all the wealth and power, and you have nothing. That's what history looks like. So we have to have these, I would say, Christian values based on the Bible to help fight against that and try and keep some balance. And that's where the vote is so important. Things go out of hand. The little person has the same vote the big person does, in theory anyhow, and we can vote to make things better. If you genuinely care about justice, right? If you are offended when things go wrong, right? You should want Christianity to be true. I'll say this in closing. When you see injustice and you are offended by it and you get mad, like, man, how can that be? That is evil. That is wrong. That's disgusting. The fact that you're disgusted by that, to me, shows more than biology. Again, I love biology, but it's more than biology. The fact that you are disgusted by that, instead of being evidence against God, I think is evidence that you are in God's image. Why are you so offended when that war on the inside of the world has nothing to do with you? Right? In fact, the more of them that die, the more resources left over for you and your offspring and your DNA. You should be happy when those people die, biologically. But when you're not, you say, that is wrong. What happens with it? It is not fair that this person dies because they're born in this country, this person lives, they're born in this country. You don't choose where you're born. That's not fair. When you're offended by injustice, instead of being evidence against God, is actually evidence for God, because I think that is evidence that you are in God's image. You say, that is not how things should be. Nature isn't the only answer. Nature's beautiful, nature's brutal. If you have this passion for justice and fairness and flourishing of people who have nothing to do with you, that is evidence that God has his image in your heart, instead of being evidence that God does not exist. And again, if God does not exist, evil doesn't exist. You just have nature. Any questions? Hard topic, right? Starts with Greek philosophy, adopted by skeptics in Western society using Christian assumptions that evil exists and that you can keep Christian values without Christianity, right? I mean, some of those quotes, David Hume, I think, also talked about the greatest good. Well, we don't need God. We just have to decide what's the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. Well, that's a dictator's dream, because as soon as you say the greatest good, greatest amount of people, that justifies you to oppress anybody you want, as long as it's a minority, right? So, again, it's another thing where I dug into it, and it sounds impressive, really smart people quote it, and you dig into it, and you're like, and it just kind of starts to fall apart. And you're like, wait a minute, if there is no God, there is no evil, you know? And again, with all this, I want to be sensitive, right? This is kind of the logic, the theoretical explanation. It's nice if you have someone you really care about getting hurt, right? Or suffering, you know, when you see that, the logic isn't always the answer, right? It's just horrible, and just lament the horribleness of it. But as you're doing that, I would encourage you, right? Like Jacob wrestling with the angel, he was scared, and he just said, let go of me. He says, I will not let go of you until you bless me. Let me close with this story, and then we'll take some questions. So when I was a young adult, I was a young man, and twice within about a 6-month period, there's one of my friends just graduated from Andrews. I was in Vancouver, and he was going to actually come and be my roommate as he started practicing physical therapy. He just got his master's in physical therapy. Before he did that, he went back home to northern BC, And he used to be a little boy, and he grew up with these big mountains nearby. I always looked at these mountains. Now he's an adult, healthy, fit, going running all the time and stuff like that, an experienced mountaineer. He's like, I'm coming for those mountains. He went back to where he grew up and wanted to summit these beautiful peaks near his home. And he told his dad, if I'm not back by sunset, call search and rescue. So he went up the mountains, came down in a rush. Things always take longer than you think, right? Came down in a rush, jumped in his car, didn't want his dad to call search and rescue, so he's speeding home. And he was a crazy driver. I'm a bit of an aggressive driver. I was scared in his car. Let me put it that way. He's driving so fast, he goes around this one corner, and he loses control, and his car slides to the left. At the exact same time, a semi-truck carrying concrete is coming this way, ran right over his car. He's instantly dead. At his funeral, I wasn't feeling great. I wasn't like, just hold on to God stronger. I was like, God, you could have had him trip on a twig on the way down. Could have had him get a flat tire. Anything. 1 second off, you're either in front of the semi in the ditch or behind the semi in the ditch. Right? It's just the perfect timing to get smashed. And I'm like, why didn't God do something? My other friend, awesome young man, he cut down tree limbs and stuff. He was limbing in the Vancouver area, and he was cutting off he's up in the tree, cutting down a big tree branch, and part of the branch is rotten. You can't see it from the outside, right? So it was rotten, so it twisted, spun around, and pinned his head against the tree trunk. Mushed his brain. Died. Beautiful handsome young man, whole life ahead of them, both of them believers, love the Lord, and I'm at their funeral. And I'm not feeling really super awesome right now. Now they're my friends. But we're there, and we're kind of like, God, why didn't you have him trip on a twig? Or, a million things could have been different. After both funerals, people who were at the funeral said, there was something different about those church kids. There's a different thing about them. And that's what God has to offer in suffering. Not a cure-all now. Heaven's a cure-all, right? So we believe, Revelation, he will wipe away every tear. In the meantime, we're here. In the meantime, what you have is you do not weep as those who have no hope. In the midst of the pain and suffering, we have this hope. Even when you don't feel like you're holding on to God, the fact that you're fighting with God does give you some hope. And sometimes it's not for you. When the 3 Hebrews in the book of Daniel were thrown into the fiery furnace, the Bible doesn't say they saw Jesus in the fire. It was the pagan king on the outside who caused the injustice was the one who said, whoa, there's someone who looks like a son of the gods. I put 3 people in there, there's 4. And at those funerals, I wasn't seeing God. It was the people on the outside who didn't believe in God were seeing God walk with me when I couldn't see God walk with me through the injustice, through the suffering. And so that's something that's really, really amazing, that God can help you. God can help you through the suffering. You are going to suffer in this world. You can either suffer without God or you can suffer with God. And I'll just tell you, it is better to suffer with God. Right? And God doesn't always give you the answers. Book of Job, he never gave Job an answer. He basically said, trust me. Right? And sometimes we don't have the answer. We can trust God. Our lives are better when we trust God. We will heal emotionally faster when we trust God. And going to counseling and stuff like that. Right? And so don't fall for the temptation. When bad things happen, sometimes you're tempted to run away from God. I would say be like Jacob. Hold on to God. Say, I won't let go of you until you bless me. And also have the faith to know that maybe part of this suffering to someone else who will never go to church, they're never going to read their Bible, you are the only Bible they're going to read, and this might be a way God can reach somebody else. Okay? All right, any questions? I like that you're taking notes. I hope you're taking notes. Maybe you're just doodling. Yeah. You look like an A student, front row. All right. Any questions?
Can I share a story real quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Should you share a little story?
Yeah, so...
we got the orange mic up here.
Is
Test,
it on?
test. There we go.
Okay. So it's not... About 3 weeks ago, somebody came to mind. Specifically, it was my son's mother-in-law. we had a little bit of a falling out about 7 months ago. I hadn't prayed for her in a long time. It's not difficult to do. It took 5 years for her to get upset at me. Usually it's sooner than that. But it was, I thought, okay, Lord, I'll pray for her. And then that led to praying for 8 of her children. 8 children. She has 8. And as I'm praying for her children, that was either Sunday night or Monday morning. I can't remember which prayer time it was. On Monday, I was working with my son. And it was later in the afternoon. I asked him how his son was. He said, my son. I said, well, your stepson. His wife's first baby is her little brother. And he's 19 years old. And I said, how's Noble? He said, he's fine. I said, okay. He lives with his sister and my son. I ran an errand for about an hour. I came back, and my son was sober-faced, and he said Noble was in a motorcycle accident. I said, is he okay? He said, they say he's good, but they won't let him see him. It turns out I run my son to the hospital so he could drive his wife's car home because they knew she was going to be a mess. And out comes the mother-in-law, and I believe that God softened my heart. I was the first person she was able to hold on to. I ran up to her, she ran to me. We held each other, and he was probably going in excess of 75 miles per hour. He rear-ended a truck on I-25, and he walked away with a broken arm. He had other superficial injuries that took about 3 weeks to work through. But I was able to say, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was prayer that allowed you to be here today. And so praying for others, we don't know why God puts them on our heart, but it will help strengthen us to strengthen them and to see God.
And did he decide to get a vehicle with airbags?
I did say, and then my next prayer is that you get a very nice car.
I've done the research. I used to love classic cars, and then I watched the YouTube videos of the government crash testing them, and the old cars are murder machines, and bicycles are even worse. I have a dirt bike. I love my dirt bike, but I'm just like, I know the science, the data, and I did not get a street legal dirt bike on purpose. And they're like, oh, I'll just ride a little bit. It's, it's so convenient, and so far I'm resisting the temptation. But yeah, I'm glad he's okay. That's amazing. All right, any other questions? We're wrapping up here. You guys see why we don't do more than 2 topics the afternoon, right? You guys are apologized out. All right. Well, no problem. We can close with prayer, and then I'll kind of hang out here for a little bit. If anybody wants to come up and talk, that's fine. Again, a big thing I want to say is don't be scared of your questions. Number 1, God's big enough to handle them, and number 2, also, be humble, accept some mystery. Nobody has all the questions. If they say they have all the answers, they're lying. And that's okay. And that's the journey, right? And, but in my experience, when I looked into it, again, both sides of the argument, I'm looking into the what's the explanation if there is no God for the universe, right? What's the explanation for injustice if there is no God? Human flourishing. I look at both sides, and I'm like, I'm sorry, but Jesus has better answers. I really believe that. And hopefully I share. That's my journey. Hopefully, if you're here, you have some questions. Hopefully, some of your questions got answered. Your faith got strengthened. Right here.
As no one has a question, I'm going to ask him to share his thoughts on... I like it the way you approach since this morning, because you don't try to create this dichotomy between faith and reason. Mm-hmm. We don't need to put the Bible against science, the Bible against nature. So I would like you to share your thoughts about how important it is to be humble towards the knowledge we can get from reality by studying reality, and that not necessarily is a contradiction with the Bible, and then actually mature Christians are able to live a life where they can reconcile in their minds pretty well, and also not just able to reconcile that in their minds, but be mature enough to share with others that the God of the Bible is not a fairy tale, but the God of the real world, the true reality where we exist in. So I think I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it kind of comes back to, I shared a little bit earlier, you can't just believe in the New Testament, because the New Testament says all Scripture is inspired, is primarily referring to the Old Testament. So if you believe in the Bible, you also want to engage with nature, where God says, taste and see that I am good, right? There's other verse, it's in Cambridge or Oxford, above the chemistry department, done all this world-changing research there, and it says, blessed are those who study the works of his hands. It's a Bible verse, right? In the Science Center, not the theology center, the Science Center. And so with that, we're always learning, we're always growing, our knowledge is always partial, right? With that though, like we say, nature's God's second book, right? But both with science and with the Bible, I mean, there's stuff, I've preached sermons wrong before, like with David and Bathsheba. I know I did research. A little research is a dangerous thing. I researched, David's palace and where, Bathsheba's residence probably was, Uriah's residence, and Bathsheba, and where she was bathing. And I literally say, no, she was very beautiful, but not very bright, because where she was taking a bath was in plain sight of David's palace. Well, then later on, as I learned more about it, I realized all the verbs in that passage are masculine. All of them are masculine, right? Then you learn about the culture more, and all the men. My professor, my Old Testament professor, Dr. Davidson, almost got killed. He was over in the Middle East. He went up to check out the sunset on the rooftop in the evening. The Muslim neighbors, were ready to come over and kill him. Why? Because everybody knows women take their bath on the rooftop at this time, you perv. You trying up there and spy on my wife? Nasty American, And so David wasn't supposed to be there at all. So Bathsheba wasn't complicit. She was basically power raped. And so with that, just like I did my research, like I had pictures of Israel and Jerusalem and the capital, and I had the angles and all this, right? And then yet I find out more. Just recently, 2 weeks ago, I was at Union University talking to a young man, college student, not even graduated, undergrad yet, right? And he was sharing about the 12 apostles. So when I do the Santa story that I did today, one of the things, I've read it many places, that 11 of the 12 apostles were murdered for the story of Jesus. He mentioned something that actually we don't have good evidence they're all murdered. I was like, huh? I've heard that so many times. So the earliest evidence we have is that 11 of them were murdered, but for some of them, the earliest evidence is 500 years later. That's not historically reliable. Now, James, son of Zebedee, James, the brother of Jesus, Peter the apostle, Paul the apostle, we have very good evidence they're all murdered for their Christian faith very early on, and the rest of them were willing to die. But when you have, 300, 400, 500 years, one source 500 years old, that's not reliable. And so I took it out here because we're short on time, but normally I have a slide with the 12 apostles. I redid it. Instead of saying they all but John, 11 and 12 were murdered, I said they were all willing to suffer. And so all of our knowledge is incomplete, And so what am I going to do? So I messed up more evidence for God. I mean, that's my title, right? And I'm even having the bad evidence. Well, I can't research everything all the time. So I'm doing the best I can each week. I want to be open to learn and go back and revisit it. And so for me, that's similar with the Bible. It's similar with psychology, with, marriage. Read books about marriage and relationships, etc. With all of this, everything we learn, it's better than not learning, but it's always partial. And so you want to be confident, but humble. Not like, well, there's no such thing as truth, so don't even learn anything. Everybody's messed up, right? Well, that's like throw the baby out with the bathwater. Then on the other side is we have the truth, I have the truth. You don't believe the exact same as me, you're going to go to hell, sort of a thing, or whatever. Well, number one, that's not very winsome. And number two, you have the truth already? Well, if you're going to be learning for the next billion, trillion years more truth, how much of what you will know in a billion years do you know now? Very small, right? And so again, you don't want to be just wishy-washy everywhere. You also don't want to be overly confident. And so trying to have that right balance of humility and confidence is very important, including with science. How does science integrate with the Bible? There's things I just don't know. And part of my maturity has really been just accepting, I'm okay with that. Right? But then looking at what can I know? right? We can know about the manuscripts. We can know about the Dead Sea Scrolls. We can know about prophecy. We can know about DNA and biology and fine-tuning the universe, you know. And maybe scientists will come out with a really good theory on how the universe came into existence without God in 10, 20 years. That's fine, right? As a person living in 2026, I'm trying to do the best I can with the best knowledge I have available now with my limits of time and energy to study it that I have now. So what I think we should all do is we should all do our honest best to become the best people that God intends us to be. You know? Does that answer? Kind of? I
My question was in the sense of nowadays there are strong movements among even the Christians that think that studying deeper is a waste of time, and that Christians should just rely about loving Jesus, giving food to the poor. That's all. We don't need to study. We don't need to go deep. We don't need to be able to respond to the reason of our faith. We had a lesson about apologetics the last quarterly. I think it was really important. But many people losing their faith in this secular world because they don't have a solid foundation about their faith. And this message that sounds nice, but doesn't prepare people to respond the reason of their faith. Not just about responding, doing like converting people. It's about to know where you're putting your life, where you base your life on. So if you have a solid foundation for what you believe, then you can share with others. So you cannot help others if you don't have a solid foundation for yourself.
Yeah, and so there's a couple Bible principles, like, you know, be able to give a reason for the faith that you have is one verse. There's another verse where Paul is talking to Timothy, and he says, you know, a workman who needeth not to be ashamed, correctly dividing the word of truth, that you're working at this, you're always learning, you're studying, you're having an open mind, and you're putting time into it, right? And so, you know, the Bereans, where Paul said, no, Paul's preaching. He says, don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Right? And so there's lots of churches that are named the Berean church, right? That, you know, they have a wonderful pastor. He doesn't want you just to believe everything he says. Go home and check it out. All that I said, go, you know, you have Google, you have a Bible, go check it out for yourself, right? And so again, it comes back to, if we follow God's word, it tells us not to be lazy, right? Now, we shouldn't only study the Bible and not serve the community. Which again, you know, is that balance where we do the best we can, and there's that balance. You know, a tire has a bunch of spokes, and so one of the things that I want to sleep at night, or I want to eat. You know, I'm not as good at running all the time, but, you know, I'm trying to get out and run at least 10 minutes a day. You know, trying to get my European pooch down from all those beautiful bakeries in Europe. You know, and so we're juggling that. So as we're studying the Bible, we're serving the community, we're having fun to have fun. We're working hard, you know, doing overtime, right? Providing for our families, and we're trying to solve problems. Whatever, you know, let's say you're a plumber. You're trying to help people not have sewage overflow their house, right? And so we're trying to juggle all that. But if you believe the Bible, you're not allowed to be lazy, right? Now, you're going to balance hard work with rest. You're not allowed to be lazy. You should be diligent in serving the community and diligent in your prayer and Bible study, you know? And so, again, you know, it comes back to this. And again, I love science. I'm going to come back. Science says you're better off that way. You're not happier being lazier. Lazy people aren't happy. Now, there's also workaholic on the other extreme, right? The happiest people are the ones that have very rich relationships, right? With their creator, with their family, with their community, and that have purpose, right? People don't become happy by trying to be happy, scientifically. You become happy by pursuing purpose and pursuing community, of which following Jesus is the best thing we've ever seen for pursuing purpose and pursuing community. All right, let's close with prayer. And then if you have more questions, feel free to stay here. But thank you for participating, for being here, and I hope you're all encouraged. Dear Lord, thank you for every man, woman, every boy and girl in this room and those watching online. Thank you that we can explore, you know, the biggest, toughest questions. We went through a whole host of things this weekend, Lord, and yet we've only really touched the surface. Each one of these topics we could do a whole semester on, Lord. But Lord, as we're getting at least a little introduction, a little taste test of some of these answers that are available to us, if we're willing to take the time and study and engage on these topics, Lord, we can see that really Christianity isn't a brain-dead, blind faith religion. That Christianity, when properly handled and properly studied, is the most sophisticated school of thought, both scientifically, philosophically, Lord, and theologically, Lord. There's nothing that comes close to following the teachings of Jesus Christ, especially in the Gospels, but also in the rest of the Bible, Lord. And there's nothing that can be as fun as learning how to walk with you and love you and serve you faithfully. So Lord, I pray that as we leave this room, we're not just intellectually nourished and academically challenged, Lord, but more importantly, Lord, I pray that our confidence in our faith in God would be stronger, so we'd be more willing to take risks, that we'd be more willing to devote ourselves to you even more, to sacrifice more, to give more, to love more, to serve more. In Jesus' name, all of God's children said, amen. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been a blast, and I hope it's not the last time we get to hang out. You know? So thank you. I'm here. If you have any questions, come on up here. Don't be shy.